Hi, everyone. My name is Santiago Martinez, partner at the Arena, and today we're talking about the Organizing Goals Calculator tool in the Arena Toolbox. So this is a tool that campaign managers, organizing directors can use to create real meaningful goals aimed at building a volunteer program and contacting voters. The Goals Calculator can help organizing directors create real accountability for their organizers by week and be able to give them the ability to look ahead at what are the coming week's priorities. The tool establishes weekly goals to keep the campaign on track, looking at key metrics, attempts, conversations, shifts recruited, shifts completed, and should be used in all parts of the campaign to help inform reports, to track progress to goal. And the organizing goals calculator is really meant to be updated periodically by the organizing director throughout the campaign as goals are hit, missed, exceeded, really as campaign capacity changes. And so once the goals calculator is completed, the organizing director and the campaign will have goals for things like team building, shift recruitment, voter registration, persuasion and turnout, specifically looking at both phones and doors and maybe even text message. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can take a quick look at this document and see what we're actually talking about. And very similar to some of our other documents, this is a Google spreadsheet. Starts off with a tab that just kind of guides and gives a general overview of the document. And so some of this might look familiar. The cells are again color-coded to indicate what you can do with those. There are 4 different tabs on this. In addition to the guide, there's an assumptions tab where you can set up this document to make it district specific with your universe and allocating some of the goal resources for GOTV. Here we actually explain a little bit more in depth the organizing tab. This is where you're going to really establish the timeline for when goals will be allocated. And there's a number of different metrics that we've included in here. And so we wanted to just provide a little bit more detail on definitions for those and who might be responsible for making updates to those throughout the campaign. We also have an organizing timeline tab. This is something that will update automatically as you make changes to the organizing tab to provide just a visual representation of the campaign via a Gantt chart. This is something that you can take and plug into campaign plans or share with campaign manager or candidate to help them understand when and where certain activities will be taking place. We also have another resources tab here. We understand that sometimes there's collaboration with either a coordinated campaign or a with paid efforts via the campaign that are separate from the organizing program, but are very much working in tandem. And so this tab very much mirrors the organizing tab. Might have slightly different assumptions, and so we wanted to just provide an area where you can keep track of that and make sure that specific voters that you're hoping to do outreach to, we can account for that and know where that work is supposed to be happening and by who. So we'll very quickly go through the assumptions tab. Here's where, again, you're kind of setting up some very, very preliminary information where you can enter in the size of your universe, both phones and doors for the persuasion part of your program. You can also indicate what percentage of that universe is being contacted by your volunteer organizing program versus your paid or coordinated program. It might be that your universe is small enough that you're planning to do 100% of the work. It might be that this is a much larger universe and you're splitting it between, or getting additional outside help or using paid resources to try to pay canvassers or something like that. And so if we change that, this will, by updating those numbers and allocating the numbers, will automatically calculate what percentage is left over and will be accounted for by a different part of the campaign. And so that will impact what happens on the organizing tab and on the other resources tab. You can do the same for your voter registration program. How many new registrants are we trying to register? Same with your turnout program. We added text messaging here because that might be a resource that you use to do outreach to voters in the end who are your supporters, and you're just simply trying to push out a get out the vote message or tell people where their polling location is. Below this is where you can kind of set this document up for GOTV. We understand that some of you might be using this for your primary, so you can enter in your primary election day, or you can leave this as is as your general election day, and we'll calculate which days preceding are your GOTV days. GOTV takes on a very large amount of work in order to build up towards, because you're contacting potentially as many voters as you did in those 4 days, in the lead up to GOTV. So there's a lot of work there, a lot of shifts that you have to recruit. So we've put in a ramp for GOTV recruitment so that when you are 5 weeks out, 3 weeks out, you can already be beginning the process of recruiting some of those shifts. And so this is just a little bit of how we will, kind of recommend that you begin thinking about recruiting some of those shifts, how many passes of the universe that you are hoping to do during the GOTV period. Next to that, based off of the size of the universe that you've inputted, we'll go ahead and calculate how many attempts does that actually equate to. And then based off of some assumptions that we have on the organizing tab, as far as number of phone calls per shift or door knocks per shift, we estimate the number of shifts needed. So just to already kind of get you into the frame mind of how much work is actually going to be required for GOTV and preparing yourself mentally for what that will take and mean, we've included that here. So let's go to the organizing tab, and this is where you can look at all the different kind of aspects, from staffing to team building to volunteer recruitment to persuasion, voter registration, and turnout, where you can look at your campaign on a full timeline. Think of this section here to the right and middle of this document as kind of your campaign calendar, kind of spread out here in these cells. We have some helpful formulas here at the top that'll just tell you what week you're actually in, so you can quickly find where you need to be. And in these yellow cells across here, you can indicate, what are the percentages in terms of you are in terms of building your capacity. So this first section here is related to the amount of staff. Do you have 25% of your staff? And at what point are you get to your full capacity in terms of staffing up? The same down here for your team building. How many leaders are you hoping to recruit? How many one-on-ones? How many team meetings per week are people trying to have? How many organizers are you trying to hire? And what are their weekly call goals for doing outreach to volunteers? The volunteer recruitment section down here actually doesn't have its own percentage ramp. The goals here are very much dictated by what you put in to the cells below here. So the shifts that you need are related to the number of phone calls or door knocks that you might be doing in your persuasion program or your turnout program. It's very much dictated by the need of the campaign, not so much when you might be doing it. So that's just something to keep in mind as you start to make changes and adjustments. We have some helpful conditional formatting and formulas here to help indicate, where you are in terms of allocating the number of attempts and contacts for each part of your program. So you'll notice here that it says error 92%. That just means you haven't allocated the full 100% of the contact goals for that particular part of the program. So, if we come here and we maybe, make changes to update this, and we make this 8, and we take this 11. as we make changes, you can see the cells below that change, update, and it shows that we've allocated 100% of our goal. So all of these gray cells here are calculating specific parts of, either the number of attempts, contacts, or the shifts required. The shifts required is doing, based off of the number of attempts that we've said we'd do and the number of attempts per shift that we'd said that a volunteer who's coming into the door would do. Right now we have that set at 50. You can increase this number to, maybe we want to give people a packet of 100 calls instead of a packet of 50. That will reduce the number of shifts you need. So that's just, again, another way that you can kind of tweak and play around with these numbers. The same kind of principles go for how you kind of approach the doors, your contact rates. Depending on the different parts of your program, the contact rates will be different for both turnout and persuasion, doors versus phones. We've plugged in some like industry standard numbers. These will definitely change throughout the campaign. Your district might have better contact rates. They might have worse contact rates, especially if there hasn't been an election in that district in a while. There's reasons why these numbers might be different. You can also update the timeline for your voter registration campaign if you have one. If you don't, you can feel free to just kind of hide this and don't have to look at it, don't have to worry about it. Turnout is pretty much the same as the persuasion part up above. If you don't have any numbers indicated on the assumptions tab for a part of the universe, say we're not doing any text messaging, this will all show up as zeros, even if you have numbers, percentages here. So if something looks sort of off, I would always go back and check the assumptions tab. The additional section that this has, that the persuasion and voter registration tabs sections don't have, is just this GOTV section, which breaks it out by day. Because again, every single day of GOTV, you're attempting to potentially talk to more voters than you have in in days previous. And so here you can indicate in the blue sections, and you can change and update this to indicate how many numbers of passes that you're going to be doing. So if you're doing multiple passes, you want this to add up to, if you're planning on doing 2 passes, you want these cells here to add up to 2, and this helpful language here will just tell you the number of GOTV passes that you're accounting for here. And if you're only doing 1, it'll show that. As you make changes here, the organizing tab again will update automatically, and the darker colors will just indicate where more work is happening. Sometimes you'll have a day of action or something, and so you might see the colors pop a little bit more, but then kind of go back down. That's again kind of the ebb and flow of your campaign calendar. And then the final tab looks very, very similar to the organizing tab, but is just your other resources. If you haven't indicated on the assumptions tab that any outside resources are coming in, these will all just show up as 0, even if you have percentages allocated here. And we have just some like default numbers plugged in, and you can delete these if your numbers are different. If you're not going to use this and this is not going to be a resource, you can just go ahead and hide this tab. But if it is, and these numbers are still showing up as 0, you can go back to the assumptions tab, and we can change. Maybe we're going to do 60% of our door knocks will be volunteer, 40% will be through the coordinated campaign. You'll see now that we've made that change, this part of the document is now updated. That is our organizing goals calculator. We hope that you find it useful and wish you the best of luck.